So, this is how it feels at the beginning of the end of the world. No warning, no sirens, just darkness. On the morning of April 28th of 2025, millions of people across Spain, Portugal, and some areas of southern France watched their lives power down. Literally. One flicker, then chaos. Mobile phones went dead. Trains stalled. Streets jammed. And for a moment, time stopped. The story today will take you inside the blackout that left an entire region gasping for power, and what it reveals about just how fragile modern civilization really is. And I'm talking fragile. Welcome to That's Life, I swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. April 28th, 2025 began like any other day. Across the Iberian Peninsula, people woke up, had their morning coffee, dropped their children at school, and settled into their workplaces. No one could have predicted that by midday, Spain and Portugal would nosedive into what many would later describe as a glimpse of the apocalypse. At precisely 12:23 p.m., the electrical grid serving over 55 million people went completely dark. In an instant, modern civilization retreated, exposing the fragile framework upon which contemporary society balances. For nearly 12 hours, Spain's population lived through what experts have long feared, a total systems collapse that brought one of Europe's most developed nations to its knees. Now, what was this descent into the darkness like? The initial response from the public was somewhat mundane. When the power first failed, people just assumed that localized outages were happening, perhaps maintenance work was happening, or a minor technical glitch. But as minutes stretched into hours, and as mobile phones lost service and internet connections failed, a collective realization cascaded over the population. This was happening, unbelievable as it seemed. In Madrid, thousands were trapped underground in subway cars. Their commutes transformed into claustrophobic ordeals. High-rise buildings became vertical prisons as elevators froze between floors. Hospital staff rushed to active emergency generators, knowing countless lives hung in the balance. In city centers, traffic lights went dark, turning intersections into highly chaotic free-for-alls. Everyone was suddenly thrust into the same primitive condition, remarked one observer, who watched the unfolding scene from a cafe near a Madrid elementary school. Some rushed in panic, while others sat drinking on terraces, as if toasting the world's end. As the hours passed, populations divided into distinct groups, those treating the blackouts as an unusual adventure, and those calmly but purposefully preparing for worse scenarios, and those gripped by an increasing sense of dread. Parents left their workplaces to collect their children from school. Lines began to form deep at bus stops, with overloaded vehicles passing by without stopping. Many people walked miles to reach their homes, many carrying water bottles and groceries secured with what little cash they had on hand. Well, the clock was ticking. Many failed to comprehend how quickly society's collapse might accelerate. Experts in infrastructure security have long warned that modern cities operate on precise timetables of vulnerability once electricity disappears. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, here's a timeline. Within 6 hours, communication systems fail as backup batteries deplete. Emergency services become overwhelmed. Food and refrigerators begin to spoil. Within 12 hours, fuel pumps cease functioning. Hospital generators approach critical fuel levels. Water pressure drops in high-rise buildings as pumping stations fail. Within 24 hours, medicines requiring refrigeration become compromised. Patients on life support face grave danger. Water supplies in urban centers begin failing. Food distribution halts entirely. Within 48 hours, sanitation systems collapse. Public health emergencies emerge. Are you getting the picture? Without electricity, we go back to the Stone Age, especially in high-density urban centers. Civilization as we know it would be on the brink. Spain stood at the precipice of this countdown. The population largely unaware of how close they were to witnessing a complete collapse of society. The blackout would eventually end before reaching those later stages, but the weakness had been exposed. As afternoon turned to evening, Spanish cities transformed into other landscapes. Streets that were typically dominated by the glow of storefronts or the hum of traffic became eerily quiet. People gathered in parks, having nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. Families picnicked with perishable food rescued from warming refrigerators. Some neighborhoods took on a more festive atmosphere, sort of a collective denial of the growing emergency. In Barcelona, residents of upper floors in apartment buildings discovered they had no water as electrical pumps failed. In Seville, hospitals canceled all non-emergency surgeries. The country's gas stations with no functioning pumps could not dispense fuel. Stores without electronic payment systems closed their doors, though some accepted cash for essential supplies. The more prepared citizens filled their bathtubs with water while they still had the chance. Others scavenged for batteries, candles, and non-perishable foods. Chinese bazaars sold out quickly of portable radios, the only reliable source of information, with telecommunication networks failing. Bottled water vanished from market shelves within hours. It was like watching the first act of every disaster film ever made, said one observer. People were searching for cell signals, like ancient diviners looking for water. When someone found a connection, crowds gathered around them, desperate for news. The national government's response proved hopefully inadequate. The Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, appeared on emergency broadcasts nearly 5 hours after the initial failure, offering nothing more than confirmation that officials had no explanation for the catastrophe. Well, thanks for the update. This vacuum of leadership only heightened public anxiety. The blackout raised more terrifying possibilities for those with knowledge of infrastructure vulnerabilities. Was this a cyber attack, perhaps the opening salvo of something larger along the lines? Could it be related to the ongoing war in Ukraine? Or might it be even more devastating? Something called a Carrington event, a massive solar storm that destroys electrical infrastructure worldwide. The last time we had the Carrington event happened in 1859. It caused telegraph systems to burst into flames across North America and Europe. Now, in today's more electrical-dependent world, experts from NASA to the Pentagon have warned that a similar solar event could cripple global infrastructures not just for hours or days, but for years or even decades. It's not a question about whether we will suffer one of these Carrington events. It's a question about when it will happen. Holly Gilbert, the former director of NASA, has warned. Spain's blackout offered a brief window into this nightmare scenario. Had the outrage continued for days rather than hours, the orderly, more cheerful response might have quickly dissolved into something more darker. During the crisis, observers noted two contradictory human responses that emerged simultaneously: remarkable civic cooperation and dangerous complacency. Throughout Spanish cities, people directed traffic at darkened intersections. Strangers offered assistance to elderly residents of apartment buildings with non-functioning elevators. Families shared resources with neighbors. Now, surprisingly, the predicted looting and disorder many had expected never materialized during the 12-hour crisis. That's remarkable. Yet alongside this admirable behavior came a troubling innocence about how quickly conditions could deteriorate. Many celebrated the refreshing break from digital life, posting later about their delightful analog day once power returned. They remained unaware that hospitals were hours away from crisis, that food supply chains were on the verge of collapse, and that water systems were beginning to fail. The world wouldn't begin its final days with zombies invading out of nowhere, reflected one parent, who spent the evening with his child playing games by flashlight, while privately calculating how many days of supplies they had on hand. Yes, the zombies would have been all of us, wandering without purpose, unaware of how close we stand to the edge. For most of Spain, the electricity returned later that night. It was nearly 12 hours after the initial failure. The restoration came with little explanation. The European Union and Spanish electrical companies denied cyber attack theories. The National Power Grid Company offered a technical explanation involving the sudden loss of 15 gigawatts from solar generation, suggesting critical design flaws in a system increasingly dependent on renewable energy without sufficient battery storage to manage fluctuations. The economic impact would be measured in billions of euros. Thousands of businesses lost a full day of operations. Food worth millions spoiled in warehouses and restaurants. Countless appointments, surgeries, and services were canceled. Transport systems required hours to resume normal operations. Yet the true costs might be measured in lost illusions. You see, for 12 hours, Spain experienced what experts have long feared: the extraordinary vulnerability of modern society to infrastructure failure. They had survived what amounted to a dress rehearsal for catastrophe. In the days following the blackout, Spain, Portugal, and France returned to normal. People resumed their digital lives. The government promised investigations and improved safeguards. Businesses calculated losses and filed insurance claims. But something fundamental had changed for those who understood what they had witnessed. They had seen how quickly modern society could unravel. They had glimpsed the razor-thin margin between civilization and its absence. Many families began to assemble emergency kits. Others investigated solar panels and battery systems for their homes. A few even considered relocating from dense urban centers to smaller communities where self-sufficiency might be more feasible. Most people, however, returned to their routines. The lessons unlearned, the warnings unheeded. The national power grid remained vulnerable. Hospital backup systems stayed inadequate. Food distribution chains continued to operate with minimal reserves. Spain had dodged a bullet, along with France and Portugal. This time. However, the dress rehearsal exposed how utterly unprepared modern society remains for what might come next. So what are some of the lessons learned from this? Spain, Portugal, and France's 12-hour descent into the pre-technological existence offers critical insights for populations worldwide. And here's a few. The illusion of resilience. Modern infrastructure is remarkably fragile. The complex interdependencies between power, communications, water, food distribution, healthcare, and transportation mean that failure in one system cascades to the others. The danger of complacency. Many citizens treated the blackout as an inconvenience or even a refreshing break from technology, failing to recognize how quickly actual emergency conditions would develop had it continued. That's just a few. What Spain, Portugal, and France experienced on April 28, 2025 was ultimately just a warning, a 12-hour preview of a catastrophe that experts believe remains inevitable on a longer timeline. Whether from solar activity, cyber attack, physical terrorism, or simple technical failure, extended grid collapse represents one of civilization's most severe vulnerabilities. As one observer noted while watching the lights finally come back on across Madrid's skyline, we got really lucky because nobody was ready for this. Not the companies, not the government, not the people. The question remains whether this brief glimpse into the abyss will motivate meaningful change, or whether the lessons will be forgotten until the next time darkness falls. That said, the next time, the lights might not come back on so quickly. So what can we learn from this story? What's the takeaway? The April 2025 blackout was not just a technical failure. It was a social X-ray. It revealed the fragility of systems we assume are unbreakable. It reminded us how unprepared we are and how quickly life can unravel when the grid goes dark. Now, had the blackout lasted another 24 hours, the mood would have shifted. Laughter would have turned to fear. Spain, Portugal, and France would have teetered on the edge of chaos. If we are to learn anything, it's this. Resilience isn't optional. We need better systems, clearer communication, decentralized infrastructure, and a renewed understanding that electricity is not a luxury. It is the lifeblood of modern civilization. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which you can find on Apple Podcasts for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you soon.